Hello, everyone, and I would like to call to order the regular council meeting of January the 23rd, 2023. And I will read the acknowledgement, territorial acknowledgement first. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather is in the traditional territory of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. Thank you. I will then move to approval of the agenda. Thank you. Second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried. I will now move to adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of January the 9th, 2023. Thank you. Second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. That's carried. Item 4.1 is the minutes of the Committee of the Whole, the Advisory Design Panel, the Heritage Commission, and the Advisory Planning Commission. If there are no changes, errors, omissions, or additions, we could move them together, these items together. Thank you. Of all four? Thank you. Second? Councillor Appleton, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. I move to the Mayor's remarks, and first of all, my name is Cairine Green, Councillor, and I'm acting Mayor this evening. Mayor Kevin Murdoch is en route home from a family holiday out of the country. He may or may not pop in towards the end of the meeting, but I am acting Mayor this month, so it fell to me to chair the meeting. I want to acknowledge the tremendous support and help of staff today in helping to prepare me for the meeting. Really appreciate it. First of all, under Mayor's remarks, just wanted to let you know that the sidewalk patio survey is still open for public input until the end of the month, January 31st. Also want to thank the scores of people that have already participated and provided really valuable input and feedback to us. So please, if you wish to comment on the future of patios in the village, please do that online through our website, and do so before the 31st of January. I think those are all of the remarks. I don't think there are any additions to any of that information, and so I will move on to public comment and question period. First of all, welcome to all of you, either online or in the chambers tonight. The public comment and question period is an opportunity for anyone attending in person or online through Zoom or live stream to speak to council on any matter of interest. We allocate up to 30 minutes for this, and each speaker may speak for 3 minutes. Please note that this is not the time to comment on items on the agenda that are subject to public input already. The opportunity for that will occur as we move through the agenda. For speakers through Zoom, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you are wishing to speak. I have a laptop in front of me. We also have wonderful support staff who will monitor. So please, if you wish to speak, indicate through the Zoom. And for those on the telephone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. The unmuting seems always a challenge, so people love to jump in and start speaking, and we can't hear a word they're saying if they're not unmuted. So just a reminder to unmute. So hearing that and sharing that, are there any members of the public who wish to speak this evening? I will ask again, are there any members of the public who wish to speak or participate this evening in the meeting? And a third time, and it appears, hello. This is the perfect time. I'm just calling for people to speak. Yeah, would you come in then, please? Are you?
Okay, I didn't know it was happening this quickly. I'm sorry. I thought we were agenda number 9 today. She's on agenda number 9. She's on the agenda.
That actually is my mistake. I'm sorry, that,
I'm speaking to an item.
oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't clear about that. That's my mistake. So we will see you shortly. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have anyone that wants to comment generally. So we will then move on to reports and memorandums. And this is subject to public input, by the way, so this is 7.1, municipal office space options. And tonight we have our director with us, Ms. Bay, Director of Strategic Initiatives, and she will be speaking to the report. Thank you, Ms. Bay, for being here. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Sina Bay, the Director of Strategic Initiatives, and with me also supporting this report is David Graham, our Program Manager of Facilities and Asset Management, who authored the report attached to the staff report. So he is also available for questions should there be any after my introduction.
Welcome, Mr. Graham.
Back in late November, Council asked staff to bring back information on options for addressing the district's need for additional office space. And the report before you today is intended to deliver on that direction. The report provides an overview of options. We looked at using various municipal facilities as well as leasing space, and your reports will inventory the options that we looked at. There were three options that popped to the top as best meeting the district's needs in staff's opinion. One was a conversion of community meeting space at the Windsor Pavilion. Secondly, there is potential for a commercial conversion of a district-owned house on Monterey Avenue. And third was the option of leasing space. The availability of suitable space for lease is very limited, both currently and historically. The reports before you provide a summary of both what's available on the market right now as well as what has been available over years past. In summary, I can say that in December, only one suitable and appropriately zoned space was found, and renting that space would cost in excess of $800,000 over the next 10 years. Leasing space would cost more, likely, than renovating district-owned space. Covering the two other options that I highlighted, renovation and rezoning of either the Monterey House or the Windsor Pavilion would have similar costs. They would have similar timelines for completion of the renovations, and they would accommodate similar numbers of staff. Attachment 2 of your reports provides high-level net cost estimates for three options, and with the assumptions noted, Monterey would present the lowest net cost. I will, however, note that depending on what options and assumptions you put forward, that scenario might play out a little bit differently. So we made some base assumptions based on historical uses of the properties. If council wanted to look at a different assumption for the market or assume more market-based rents, obviously those numbers would look a little different. Staff put forward the options that we did because we felt they were most reflective of past uses and didn't want to be presumptuous about council's intended uses of those properties. So staff are here today to hear what council provides in terms of directions as to next steps. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Bay. Mr. Graham, do you have anything to add at the moment?
Thank you. No, that was a good summary of what we've got.
Thank you. Then I will go to council and look for questions. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on option 1, through you to staff, the timeline for occupancy in option 1, that's the Windsor Park Pavilion, is shown as 12 to 18 months, the same as for 1538 Monterey. Could you just clarify, please, is that timeline based on the conversion of the terrace space to incorporate it into usable office space, or and how does that address, or is that this is including how we manage perhaps any commitments that are already pre-negotiated for the use of the space?
Mr. Graham, sorry.
Thank you, through your worship. Really, it's a rough timeline of full occupancy. So looking at the current bookings we have in there and what rescheduling we might have to do is still open for discussion with Parks and Rec, as well as enclosing and renovating the terrace, ordering furniture. It's really from start to finish is what we're looking at.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Watson?
Thank you. Yes, I just had a question about the relative intensity of use of the Windsor Park Pavilion and the Monterey Recreation Centre attached to the library. I saw that in the report that second premise was discarded as an option just because it was such high use. But I just wondered what the relative intensity of use was between those two facilities, just to get a better sense of what goes on upstairs at Windsor Park Pavilion.
Mr. Graham?
Through your worship, we looked at it roughly the last 6 months of bookings at Windsor Pavilion. I checked with Parks and they felt that we've mostly returned to normal after COVID. So they felt they were a good sampling. In the afternoons, we chose the smaller of the meeting rooms on the second floor just because they are booked less. There are morning bookings there and we would have to work with that. The afternoon, the Windsor Pavilion has less bookings, so it's easier to move around, but I believe it was Yoga and Pilates currently has bookings in there, and we would have to work with those user groups to find alternate times or alternate locations.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Watson?
Yes, I did. Ms. Bay has alluded to this, but I did want just to inquire about the assumptions made in terms of the revenue and cost comparison for Windsor versus Monterey. And before I even ask the question, I do want to say thank you. I thought that the report was excellent, came back in a very short time frame, and really did a comprehensive look at leasehold space, which I really appreciated because I just had no idea that it would be so difficult to find something that's suitable. But I think I just want to thank the staff for their hard work over the last, over the Christmas holidays in getting this ready and bringing it back to us. But I did just want to ask about the assumption or the presentation of the cost for Windsor versus Monterey as it's presented in the report, which shows an equal cost. Noting that in order to get Monterey to the place where it would be eligible for an office occupancy is actually an estimated, early estimate, but $635,000 expenditure. And I wondered why the decision was not to include the full cost when presenting it. So that's a question to either one of you, whoever is the correct person to take the question.
Ms. Bay?
Thank you, Your Worship. It's quite correct to say that the full costs would be as cited. However, Council previously in November directed that the property at Monterey be upgraded to reflect the essential urgent repairs, as well as putting money into it to put it towards a residential use. So those decisions by Council have already been made, and the costs cited in the report are the incremental costs that would take it from those residential uses to the commercial uses. So that would be the cost in staff's mind that would be attributed to that commercial use in that case. Not unlike if we were to look at Windsor Pavilion, we're not attributing the whole cost of originally building the Windsor Pavilion to the cost of creating that as office space. We're talking about the incremental cost of taking it from its current use to its office space use.
Thank you very much. Councillor Watson?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Bay. And one final question. Going forward, how would and this is maybe for Mr. Graham, how would the enclosure of the exterior deck impact positively or negatively, or just what impact would that have on future use of the pavilion post-office occupancy by municipal staff if we pursued that route?
Mr. Graham?
Thank you, through your worship. Currently, the existing terrace or patio, whatever you want to call it, is got a roof over it, a balcony. So this would enclose the space, make it more of a fully winterized space as well. You'd be able to utilize it all 4 seasons, rather than right now it's really not utilized much in the fall, and certainly not in the winter. So this would provide a more of an accordion glazed wall that we've used in other type of facilities that would allow for seasonal use. And in the summer, we'd be able to open those accordion glass walls and bring that outside in and be able to enjoy that space.
Thank you. Councillor Smart.
I had a couple questions about the Windsor Pavilion space. One of them was, if we go through the rezoning process, could you describe a little bit about what that will look like as far as public input and the timing and such?
Ms. Bay.
Thank you, Your Worship. The rezoning process for both properties would be very similar. We'd work with the planning department to take it through the rezoning process. We've been told to take approximately 9 months to take it through that process. There would be a public hearing associated with the rezoning in either case. So the timelines would look very similar for both properties. They both need to go through a rezoning process to allow for an office occupancy of either property. So there'd be opportunity for the public to comment through the public hearing.
Councillor Smart, thank you.
Thanks. And just one other question, and I appreciate the stability of looking at 10 years and that long-term outlook, but taking a step for a moment and just looking at 5 years and sort of the financial implications of that, I'm just wondering if it was looked at in a more short-term snapshot, would you be able to use the Windsor Pavilion without those extensive renovations for the 5 new staff, or would that not functionally work? Just curious.
Mr. Graham, thank you.
Through Your Worship, we did have one of those options further on in the report that we looked at it completely unaltered and just basically moving in workstation furniture. It wasn't large enough to meet the needs of the staffing levels that we anticipated. So it was not recommended for those reasons.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Smart.
Sorry, just a small clarification. Was that within the 10-year time frame that it didn't work? Like, did you also look, I'm just wondering, with the question being framed 5 years, like, would the space have been feasible within that time frame?
Mr. Graham.
Through Your Worship, no, it wouldn't have been. Our intent is staffing up to be able to start on the infrastructure projects and asset management projects as quickly as we can, and our staffing projections already showed that we would have exceeded that space.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff. I'm just wondering whether or not there's reference made in the report to flexible work options, hoteling space, having folks come in and out of, and share workspaces. This is, as I'm understanding it, or as I'm seeing it in the workforce, becoming increasingly prevalent, and just with as has been noted, the cost and difficulty of finding commercial office space. This is becoming increasingly an option. So I'm just wondering whether there's been sort of a more directed analysis with the Human Resources Department about how we might make that work. I appreciate the fact that it's referenced in this report, and I understand that it's a little bit out of scope, but just wondering whether that type of analysis has been performed.
Thank you, Your Worship. We did not go in depth with that type of an analysis, but we did look around. There are a number of us that are kind of sharing offices that are in effect putting that into practice already. A large number of our positions do require contact with the public, and having hoteling space makes that more challenging for people to have. There's some positions that are more suited to working off-site or being on-site only for a portion of the week. There's other positions that are less suited to that. So it is something absolutely that we have been exploring with staff and facilitated where appropriate, the amount of spaces that we're needing and the nature of the positions make it such that we feel that we will be needing additional space, that such hoteling, that circulating around those positions is not going to create an optimal environment for delivering the services that we're needing to deliver. So not to say that it's impossible, but is it going to be delivering the types of services that people are used to? Maybe not. But to be honest, we haven't looked into it exhaustively. We've just kind of touched the surface of that.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you so much. When I look at Windsor, I think of how much that area, that space is used actually, and it hasn't been used a lot in the last little while because of COVID, but in the past it has been used quite a bit. To take that public space away, have we looked at what pressures that would put on our other public spaces within the municipality?
Mr. Graham?
Through your worship, we haven't taken an exhaustive look. We have looked at, as I mentioned earlier, about bookings last 6 months, and that parks considered were average and timely for this type of bookings. And there was significant spaces available even within the Windsor Pavilion, admittedly at different times, so we'd have to work with those user groups a little bit to see whether that was flexible enough or not. There are also other opportunities at our other recreation centers that would fit, again, in time slots, but whether that would work with those user groups to be able to relocate Pilates or yoga would something we haven't wanted to broach with them yet until we got direction from council.
Thank you. Any other questions before we? I think we go to the public after a recommendation, do we not? I'm just seeking a procedural confirmation. Do we go to the public now?
It's all on the wrist. The standard practice would be to have the motion on the floor before going to the public.
Thank you. So I'm seeking a motion. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Thank you. I also want to thank staff for going through the process to the best of their abilities and examining what was available both within the district and external to the district. I would propose that, well, I'll make two, the recommendation to receive the report, and then I would move to approve option 1 as presented to use 1538 Monterey, direct staff to initiate necessary building renovations and a rezoning process for 1538 Monterey Avenue to accommodate offices for municipal staff until sufficient office space is available in other municipal facilities, recognizing that in the longer term, other options remain for the property.
Thank you. So we have a more or less combined motion, one to receive and one to endorse option 1 according to the report. Are there any comments? Yes. Actually, there has been a request to separate the motions, one to receive and then one. Could we do that? I think that would make it easier. All right, thank you. So we do have an active motion. Do we need to go back and do that again for the single motion?
Acting Mayor, through you, so you have the ability on request to separate the motion, so the first consideration would then be given to the motion to receive, and then the debate and discussion could take place on the other pieces of the motion there.
Thank you. Then I will separate the motions and I will call for any further comments or questions on motion to receive the report. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. On the second motion, which is to endorse option 1, are there any comments or questions? Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my comments are as follows. I will not be supporting the motion because I think for a number of reasons, the preferable option is actually the Windsor Park Pavilion, and I will just explain why. I think that accepting Ms. Bay's argument that the costs are actually the same because the work is already has already been approved for the Monterey house, and that it's only the incremental amount that's being included. I think that making the investment in Windsor Park has the added benefit of providing an improved asset after the end of the office occupancy, as opposed to tying up resources in a very key property in the core of our village, which we may want to use for other purposes in a sort of village revitalization strategy before that 10 years has expired. The Windsor Park Pavilion is going to be there for a long time, and so using it for an alternate use for 10 years is a short portion of its long-term life. And another consideration for me is that in the Monterey house, although it would have to meet accessibility requirements on the ground floor, it would not be fully accessible. It would be fully accessible. The space for an office occupancy of a public employer. And I also think that I think it was quite a brilliant piece of property to identify. I think the whole notion of enclosing a space of that building, which is really of marginal use for probably 3/4 of the year, is an important addition to a public asset. So for those primary reasons, I would not be supporting the motion as moved and seconded to select Monterey Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So speaking against the motion on the floor, I feel that the Monterey House isn't the best option for this in the short and near term. There's a lot of different options and a lot of different potential uses, and even in the nature of potentially market rentals or some provision of housing through that house in the near term. I'm similarly not willing, or I'm not of the mind to support the loss of community meeting space either. My lean at this stage of the game is to evaluate a potential combined alternative work arrangement for some staff, combined with some leased space that may not have to be at the same scope as what was originally evaluated here in the report. So as far as the motion on the floor, I'm speaking against. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Smart and then Councillor Patterson.
I also will not be supporting this motion. I do feel like the Monterey house has so much potential, both as a residential use in the short term and a mid-short term. I feel like it's our property that has the most potential to address our community's housing needs. It has an incredible ability to start informing our urban village plan, and wouldn't want to tie down that property as government is likely to step up and support us in creating housing in our community. I'm also not a huge fan of giving up public community space. When I look at this spreadsheet, and I really appreciate the work that staff went to, this was incredibly helpful and well thought out. I do feel like when you look at the value lost, the community asset value lost in options 1 and 2, that the leasing in some ways is actually the cheapest option. And I think that it gives us the most flexibility. And I would be open also to that combination of leasing while also looking at efficiencies of hybrid working.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm speaking in support, of course, the motion that I made. I do see that the use of 1538 Monterey as the best option for protecting the value and the development potential of that asset at this point in time. And I think it will give us flexibility. Whether we will need it for the full 10 years or not is still to be determined. But I think this would allow us to construct flexible office space to meet district objectives for implementing the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan and undertaking assessment of municipal buildings to meet the long-term needs of the community. We listened to our fire chief about the fire master plan. We are going to need flexibility in all likelihood from that site, and developing Monterey is still in close proximity and would provide flexibility for that. We also, when we toured the facilities, saw the condition of our public works yard. And I think, again, there is, perhaps when Mr. Graham gets more into doing full assessments of all of the buildings, I think we are also going to need some flexible space there. So we are right now looking at the first part of this, but we are not by any means taking into consideration that we have to move ahead with some of the projects. We're dealing with the problems that that in our community needs. And so we can't articulate perhaps tonight all of the positions that may need to be moved around, but when we deal even with the fire master plan and firefighters park area, we may have to come up with extra space for the guides, for the Cub Scouts. We just don't have all of the answers to that. And I see this, I mean, it's fine to talk about a village plan, but we've been talking about a village plan for several years. We don't have one on the table at this point in time. I think we're going to see a lot of required work on our other municipal buildings when we get to the financial plan this year. And so to limit our options for public access to Windsor Pavilion or Monterey Center that would negatively impact residents, you know, and we can talk about taking them to a rezoning process, but I think if we take Windsor Park Pavilion to a rezoning process, we're going to hear a lot of pushback from the community in trying to develop that building for any other purpose. So I see this as, and I understand and appreciate the comments of my colleagues around the table that we would like to use it for better purposes. But that, in all reality, getting to a village plan, getting to the uses of the building, we're probably looking at the time frame council moves and all of the other buildings that we are going to have to look at in the facilities planning, including the marina site. We are probably at least 5 years away from realizing full potential on the Monterey house site. So, and I think the prime consideration I have in all of this is that we now have an award-winning financial plan. But if we fail to deliver on the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan and our commitments to the community, I think we're going to run into more difficulties both in how we continue to operate the facilities that we have, how we continue to not have interrupted services because of breakdown in infrastructure. And so to me, this is just the best option. It's in close proximity to the public works yard. It's in close proximity to the fire hall, and it's in close proximity to Municipal Hall here. So to try and merge Windsor Park Pavilion into this planning, or even try to go through an examination of how to utilize space in Municipal Hall and flexibility of the positions here, to me just doesn't seem as feasible as moving immediately forward with 1538 Monterey and still protecting the asset and the future potential of development of that building in the future while delivering on our commitment to infrastructure and which is basically the rationale for collecting the money that we are collecting right now in reserve funds through taxation. So I think that those are all important rationale to move forward with 1538 Monterey. But I do recognize that in a marketplace that is reliant on housing, there's a desire to do that, but I think to develop it to its full potential of multi-residence housing, we either have put it into play immediately and we might house one more family, or perhaps a family and a few other people, or we're still a few years away from a multi-residential, which is probably its highest and best purpose in the long run. So I see this as being the most flexible option to allow us to attempt to meet all of our commitments, and I thank staff in all of the consideration of what they've put forward before us tonight so that we could weigh these options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I won't reiterate some of the comments that Councillor Patterson has put forward because I'm in total agreement with a lot of the things that she said, and she covered a lot of the things that I wanted to say. I will reiterate one thing in that, as always, Ms. Bay, the reports that you put forward to us are so fabulous and are very easy to read and very easy to understand and leave us not really guessing anything. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to vote in favor of Monterey. I can't see taking away the limited public space that we have in this community. I think that puts a lot of pressure on our other public spaces. I think that Windsor Pavilion, especially, there's many user groups that are there. There's rugby, there's soccer, there's cricket, there's baseball. Those user groups, if this goes to public hearing, I think yes, it might only be in the summer or sometimes a little bit in the fall for soccer, but they use those facilities a lot, and to take that out of play for them, I think will be massive. I think fiscally, to me, it makes the most sense to use Monterey rather than any of the other places. And again, I would just reiterate the things that Councillor Patterson has said. I just think that this is the best use of our community dollars to be able to put it towards using Monterey rather than spending elsewhere in the municipality. So that would be where I'm going to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Any further comments before I go to the public for input? Councillor Smart and then Councillor Watson.
I just wanted to acknowledge the more than 20 letter writers that have written in support of keeping Monterey Avenue as residential use. And I wanted just to comment on, the more likely, and I know we don't know the future, but if it's a 5-year plan for Monterey, that's sinking $635,000 into renovating a house that is probably going to be demolished because the best use of that site is a development. And when you look at the 5-year leasing cost, it's significantly less.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up on Councillor Smart's comments and responding to Councillor Patterson, I do agree with you, Councillor Patterson, that it's reasonable to think that at least for 5 years we would not be able to move forward on anything else for the Monterey site. However, I do feel that making the addition after bad, if we, as we're continuing with what's already been approved, to turn the property into a satisfactory residential occupancy, we would then have the option to rent it for those 5 years while spending the same amount of money in improving a municipal property to give it greater flexibility of use over the long term. So I do see Windsor Park Pavilion as a better option, although I do completely hear what you're saying about the need to get this going. The fact that staff have suggested that both options are would occur, whichever one selected, over the same time frame, also gave me some confidence that pursuing a rezoning for the Windsor Park Pavilion might be a good idea. I do hazard that for both properties, we will get fairly strong input from the public, and the input from the public around Monterey Avenue will be about removing that property from housing use at a time when there are such high needs. So I appreciate everybody's input around this, but I still will not be able to support the motion. I think that the pavilion is a better choice for the community. Well, I guess they'd tell us when it goes for rezoning, but I personally think it's a better choice to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to go back to staff to ask a quick question. So the money that's going into the Monterey House right now to get it to a place where it's able to even be considered for anything, how much more money would have to be put into that property to make it rentable? Do we know that figure, or is the money that's being put in, would that bring it up to that standard?
Thank you, Your Worship. The direction that Council provided back in November would be sufficient to bring the property to the point where it could be rented. It would be then up to Council to determine who it is rented to and at what rate. But the $320,000 that we cited in this report would be the incremental cost from what Council has already approved to bring it to commercial use. So you've already authorized it to the point where it can be rented.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, and thank you so much, Ms. Bay, for, I agree, an excellent report. And thank you also, Mr. Graham, for being here to support Director Bay. I'm now going to ask for public input, and I'm going to have some help in managing the online portion. But first of all, if staff could just tell me, do we have speakers on this matter? Item number 7.
Your Worship, there's no registered speakers for this item.
Sorry, no speakers from the public then. I will acknowledge that there was correspondence, I think 20 or so letters on this matter. Is that correct? I think Councillor Smart mentioned that.
Your Worship, staff aren't aware of correspondence on this item.
Those were emails. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Emails? Correct. Okay. All right, so there are no people in the public realm that want to speak to this matter. I think everyone has had a good go at the issue. I will save my comments now for last. Just very briefly, I too will not be supporting the motion as it reads. This is one of those issues. There's this terrible, uncomfortable tension between good social policy, strong social policy, and operational needs, and it's a very difficult decision. I would have liked to have seen option 3, perhaps as a viable option, but I want to thank staff again for a report that really laid out the issues well and provided us with good information. And I have really appreciated the extent of commentary around the table tonight. I think everybody has thought long and carefully about this issue, so I will not be supporting the motion. Are there any further comments before I go to calling the question? Okay. I'm calling the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion fails, as is. Staff, what are the next? Pardon me?
Thank you, Your Worship. What staff's looking for this evening is a decision of council on how we can move forward with providing for our office space needs for staff that we are currently recruiting for the scaled-up infrastructure program, as well as for the uplands sewer, and for some of the staff who are currently doubled up or don't have spaces here in Municipal Hall. So if we could look to council for some direction on what that should be, that would be appreciated.
Council? Councillor Watson?
Thank you, staff, and through you, Mayor. I would like to propose an alternate motion, if I may. And my motion would be that we direct staff to pursue a rezoning for the Windsor Park Pavilion to permit an office occupancy to accommodate the staff needs.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? I'm sorry, there is no seconder, so that motion will not go forward. Is there another motion that someone would like to propose? Because I can appreciate the dilemma now. Unless we have a direction forward, this makes it really difficult for staff. Councillor Smart.
I'd like to put a motion forward for option 3 to direct staff to lease space to accommodate offices for municipal staff until sufficient office space is available in other municipal facilities.
Do I have a seconder for that motion for discussion? Councillor Appleton seconds for discussion. So do I have any comments, please, from Councillor Appleton? Will you speak to this then?
I would propose a friendly amendment to add to the motion on the floor, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
If I could propose an amendment that, in association with the direction to lease, that staff be directed to evaluate the minimum space required to house 10 to 12 staff, taking into account a further analysis of maximizing existing office space and alternative work arrangements.
Is there a seconder for the friendly amendment? Councillor Smart, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Ms. Williams?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Just to further to Councillor Appleton's amendment, just to let staff know, let Council know that that would be a natural part of our consideration. We're currently looking at that with the existing staff, with the shortage of spaces that we have. So that would form a normal part of our consideration. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate Ms. Williams' comments. Thank you for that. The reason that I sought to include that was I note that in the report with its, and I very much appreciate a significant rundown on alternatives for commercial lease space, recognizing that certain options for the commercial lease space were excluded for not having adequate space. I'm oversimplifying the conversation here, but working around the assumption of 10 to 12 staff, certain properties might be excluded. If an alternative arrangement of working, an alternative mode of working arrangements could be determined that would lessen the amount of space required, then certain options from the list may potentially return. Already inferred that, but that was the intent of that motion. Thank you.
Any further comments? Councillor Watson.
In exploring this new idea, I do have really a question for staff, if I may, and probably to Mr. Graham, if I may. Your report shows that over a period of time, there's a range of property available in the market, and what I want to understand is how quickly does it come and go? And so that's my first question. What's the speed of turnover when these kind of leaseholds come up, if you can answer that? And secondly, if we ended up with approval to go after lease space, do we need to give you a budget in order to allow you to go and figure that out effectively? So do you need a kind of advanced budget approval in order to make that kind of inquiry or action? Thank you.
My apologies. Without the benefit of our previous Director of Engineering who crafted that report, I can't say with clarity if we considered the full cost of leasing over a 10-year period as a part of the infrastructure program, or if that would be additional funds that would be required out of our operating budget.
Mr. Graham?
Through your worship, to refer back to the question regarding how quickly the turnover is. Some spaces turn over very quickly. There were a couple that I didn't include because by the time I was writing the report, they were already gone. Others are a little more specialized or perhaps not in areas that are as in high demand. Several of the spaces were also retail. And there's an unfortunate thing that about this time of year, more retail space comes up as businesses move around after Christmas. So it is very, very fluid and very, very flexible. I would likely need some sort of a guidance to be able to even start negotiations, and we'd have to talk further about that.
Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not in favor of this option. I will say, if we wanted to pursue it, we rather than setting the rate would be what the rate is going to be in the marketplace, but we would have to determine more succinctly the perimeter area, the boundary that we might be limited by to house staff, because the travel time would have to be also calculated. Plus, we would have to assume that if we are going external to this district, there may be more use of vehicles to get to job sites, and also to try to perhaps work with a few spaces that will house people. It could mean reshuffling a considerable amount of the staff around. I think that would take more of the department heads to figure out how their departments interact, because I see that the team that we're looking for that will be working on the infrastructure projects and the facilities will be working in close contact with one another and in close contact with the people that are part of the work crews as this work progresses. So I think certainly those sort of dynamics of the boundary areas of where we would seek space, the length of term of the lease, and we would also have to then allow for negotiation of a lease, which for private industry, you can work quite quickly, but my experience with municipal government is that it works much slower in doing lease negotiations. So those are the kind of guidance I think that we would need to direct staff. I don't think we can go far beyond the boundaries of Oak Bay, and so anyways, I'm not really in favor of the motion, but I don't think the motion lacks the clarity that staff need to allow them to move forward effectively, so that we would be, at the time we go from financial plan, we would be able to, in fact, come up with the amounts we're going to continue to contribute to reserve funds without delivering on the infrastructure replacement plan.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of this motion either, so I'll be voting against it. And basically because I think that fiscally it doesn't make sense for the municipality, and also I would hate to see us take away retail space, especially along the avenue, to put offices in and take that away from the business that could come to the avenue. We see so much of that already, where something like a real estate agency has come into the avenue and taken good retail space away that brings people to our vibrant Oak Bay Avenue, and I think that to take up retail space with office space is not good. So, but I do think it's fiscally irresponsible for us to lease a space.
Thank you. Any more comments? So we have a friendly amendment to a motion on the floor. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Do you have any further comments or?
Is that on the amendment? I think we have to do the main motion, do we not?
Oh, yeah, we have to go to the main motion now, don't we?
Your worship, yes, it's the main motion is amended, and you'll see it there on the screen.
Okay, so I'll read the main motion again for everyone. Direct staff to lease space to accommodate offices for municipal staff until sufficient space is available in other municipal facilities. In association with the direction to lease, evaluate the minimum space required to house 10 to 12 staff and take into consideration alternative arrangements for staff work locations. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. Yes, questions? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just to be clear, the motion here to direct staff to enter into the lease, I think that it's implied in this motion that an analysis of proper lease options and sort of the council decision point to actually physically enter into the lease is yet to come. Do I have that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would say that with the motion worded the way it is, which is the correct way to word it for this particular instance, this gives staff the direction to go ahead to find a lease space and to enter into that lease agreement. If we were to start to bring options back to council for consideration, debate, and enter into a negotiation process, I'm afraid in this market we would not be able to probably find and hold a space long enough to make that decision. So my suggestion is that if staff's given the direction, staff will go ahead and take into consideration what we've heard tonight and find and lease that property.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I have Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. For clarification, when we talk about leasing space, is that space with parking available?
Ms. Williams.
Yes, Your Worship, we would anticipate having to provide parking for the staff that would be in that particular facility, along with the other needs for an office.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just given what I've heard, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support the motion that's on the floor. Because my expectation would be that council would have the opportunity, and maybe I have it wrong, but I would like to have a decision point as far as what the outcome of an analysis of alternate work arrangements and what impact that would have on the necessary space before deciding on a lease space, because obviously the amount of space required is dependent on the staffing that can be accommodated there, and that of course directly relates to costs. So this could vary quite a lot in cost and implication for our budget, depending on what the outcome of the space analysis is. That was my understanding of it. So I can't support the motion as it currently stands.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to, let me start my sentence again. I would like to be able to give direction to staff this evening because this is a pressing need. And would like to be able to find a situation around the table where we could do that. And I think that in the staff report, when looking for lease space, I liked the assumptions that were, or the operating criteria that they used, and the distance from, or the radius distance from the centre of Oak Bay or from Municipal Hall to do that. And I think, as Councillor Patterson has pointed out, the market will charge what the market charges. but we do need a space for our staff. And Ms. Bay, our Director of Strategic Initiatives, has pointed out that the optimal arrangement for the staff to do this work is really to be co-located. And so I think it would be restrictive to ask staff to come back with a further level of analysis when they may need to move quickly in the market. So I would really like to see that the revised motion might be considered as a suitable motion so that we can move this issue forward without asking for further staff reports. Thank you.
Any further comments? Ms. Williams, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one further point that might help with Councillor Appleton. In considering flex work options and work from home options, completed from home, but the further evaluation, the further analysis that we have to undertake is the people who are in those positions and their ability to work from home. So it's not always an easy decision based on the position or the tasks assigned. We do consider the individual's ability to work from home. I'm one individual who has ample space to work from home but cannot work from home. So I'm just one example. I work at 150% in my office with my people co-located, and I probably work at about 60% when I'm at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Everyone has made very good points. Councillor Smart?
Just a question procedurally, if we're able to further amend the motion to take into some of the comments that we've recently heard, particularly around retail space, or just procedurally how to go from here.
I'm going to pitch that one to Mr. Coates, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council's free to amend this motion at your will.
Councillor Smart, do you wish to make an amendment?
I wish to make an amendment adding to not consider prime retail spaces as part of the lease considerations.
Do I have a seconder? I'm sorry, no seconders, so that motion does not go forward. So we're back to, I believe, the main motion, are we not? So I will call the question on the main motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion fails. So this is difficult. We haven't been able to reach a consensus on and we have pressing needs. I'm seeking some guidance from staff. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Just a question to staff and following up on well, just various comments to this effect. With the understanding that there is a pressing need and a need to act in a timely fashion, I'm wanting to clarify about the analysis of alternative work arrangements and these. Is it staff's opinion at this stage of the game, or is it staff's view at this stage of the game that such an analysis is not really going to elicit very much new information at this stage of the game? Because I did hear from Ms. Bay that a comprehensive analysis of that type hadn't yet been conducted, and fair enough, because it hasn't been directed to be conducted, so that I understand. But I also understand that the options, both physically and work style wise, as mentioned by Ms. Williams, are also a reality. So it may or may not be something that staff is prepared to answer at this stage of the game. But to what extent can an analysis of work options to what extent will that give us some new information, give council new information in order to guide their decision?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think for the reasons that Ms. Williams outlined, it's very difficult to obtain certainty through an analysis like that because it will change from year to year depending on the circumstances of the staff involved. A position may be eligible. The individual in question may not be equipped for various reasons to function well working from home. That position could be filled today by someone who could well work from home, but there's no guarantee that that person will stay in that position for the 10 years that we're looking at, and that the next person who may replace the individual is similarly equipped. We're also looking at 10 to 12 office spaces. When you look at how many office spaces that we have here at the office, it's a significant percentage of the office space that we're looking at. And so as we did the analysis, we did look around. We said, can we squeeze some people in? And we are squeezing people into offices. There's multiple, our plans are to have multiple people share office space where that's possible. We are looking at trying to make the most efficient use of the office space that we have. So those have already been factored into. Can I say definitively that we can't free up one or two more spaces? No, I can't. It's possible that we can free up a few spaces here and there. Will that provide enough for the next 10 years? Highly unlikely, just given the extent of needs that we're talking about, the nature of the positions and needing to be available to provide front counter service, and the additional complexities of needing to co-locate work units. So we might be able to say, well, we can take, these two people and put them in the basement away from their peers. That affects obviously the ability of that work unit to function and for the supervision to happen. So it's a numbers piece, but it's also a proximity piece, and it's also a public a service facing consideration. So there are layers upon layers upon layers, and that of course will continue to shift over the next 10 years. So an analysis, it would be, I just say, it would be challenging for us to come back with something definitive that would provide certainty that we did not need any new office space for the next 10 years. Might it delay an office space need for 1 or 2 years? Maybe, if we really squeeze people in, but we're having to hire a significant number of people to deliver on these infrastructure programs that council has authorized. And that's a significant immediate need to hire, that if we don't have office space to facilitate, we may need to proceed with hiring those positions in a different kind of way, where we're paying consultants, where the consultants are having to provide the office space, or we will be needing to pay more for other reasons. So we think we're going to need office space, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and that need will continue for a period likely of at least 10 years.
Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. This is such a, obviously we're very split on this, and I wonder if it would behoove us to wait until we have a full council sitting around the table to discuss this again. If we put this off for discussion when we had all 7 of us sitting around the table, I'm wondering if that might make a difference. And if we did do that, if we would we be able to put that onto a committee of the whole meeting that's upcoming, or a special committee of the whole meeting? And I'm wondering if there's an appetite for that around the table. I'm just wondering if to have the mayor's voice in on this as well might help us in our decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. That thought crossed my mind last week when I understood that the mayor would be away, that this was of sufficient importance that it might require all of council at the table. So that's not a thought that I didn't have, but nevertheless, Councillor Patterson, you had a comment?
I do, thank you. And listening to all of the discussions here and what the staff has put before us, and understanding the complexity, there is no perfect solution to this that meets all of what we desire. For those of us who have been around for a few years longer and trying to get infrastructure done, there's obviously an impetus to get on with the infrastructure and get on with our facilities. I see the only 2 viable options that will allow us that will prove feasible to allow us to move forward with the plans and meet our objectives are either the Windsor Pavilion or the Monterey House. And I know when I was looking around the district at buildings, certainly the Windsor Pavilion came up as an obvious swing space that could be utilized. However, taking a public use facilities building like that, a recreational building, a parks building, and putting it into a commercial pool of buildings is less than desirable, in my opinion at least, in benefiting the community. We want to move on with perhaps a new building at Carnarvon Park, so to shortchange the community by giving this one up at this point in time, although I appreciate Councillor Watson's commentary on this. I fall back to the Monterey House. I know that we would all, I think, around the council table, like to see it incorporated into the village plan, like to see it become housing in the future. And we as a council can expedite that by allowing the temporary use of it for this to expedite the other projects. And in doing that, then perhaps allowing ourselves the potential to get on with the village plan and determine a longer term use to this space. Because at this point in time, we don't have another alternative for 1538 Monterey either. So I just ask my colleagues around the council table to think about the tours we took of the facilities in the municipality that need to be addressed, the fact that we have some staff now on board that have the competencies to move us forward in these projects. We understand what we need in adding to the staff to expedite the other projects, and this will just allow us to move forward on all fronts. It does delay putting the Monterey House back into the pool for its highest and best use, but it doesn't prevent that in the future. And so I fall back to it. I certainly appreciate the comments on the Windsor Park Pavilion. And I guess as a last resort, I might entertain that, but I would certainly like to hear from our staff at the rec center about that, because it really just takes more out of the pool of what is available to our community rather than adding back value. So hopefully some more thought will be given to using 1538 Monterey. It allows the space for the staff, close proximity to all of our other municipal buildings, and has some space available for parking, so that becomes less of an issue there also. So I just putting it back to you, Madam Chair, to perhaps again have some discussion around that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Smart, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I acknowledge this is such a complicated problem. I still feel like even though we have to give up a little bit of faith in staffs to come up with the right solution for lease, that it still is a really strong option. I don't like a place could come up at Athlon Court tomorrow, and that could just be perfect. Like, it's just to give them the capability of finding that space if we dictate that it's not retail space. I just think there's an opportunity to not tie up Monterey. And I feel like if we put $635,000 in there, that we're going to have a hard time in 5 years letting go of that office space. And it's going to hold up the potential of that property from becoming an amazing project.
Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Smart, for those comments. I guess my take on that is it is a lot of money. Would it mean that I wouldn't change course in the future? Absolutely not. I wouldn't let that limit my decision in the future, because there would be other revenue opportunities coming in from redeveloping the Monterey space long term. That being said, when you look at what we want to achieve, ramping up our infrastructure projects 3 to 5 times, we're talking $200 million in projects in the next 10 to 15 years. The 600,000 is a very small portion of those costs that we need to get started on this. And so that's how I look at it. You could talk about throwaway costs, but I see it as really being part of the project costs. And of course, the staffing was included in the infrastructure replacement plan. So I just look at this as a cost of getting on with that work and being a very small proportionate share of what the cost of the infrastructure projects and the facilities projects when we get into them also.
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and this is more directed towards staff at this stage of the game. In terms of the ongoing usage of 1538, and I think I know the answer to this, but just for confirmation, should staff be housed in 1538 Monterey? It's a municipal property with municipal staff working in it. I would assume that there is no formalized tenancy agreement, for want of a better word, that the work unit operating out of that, potentially operating out of that building, let's say it's engineering, would understand that that office space could be altered, discontinued, or otherwise modified at any time based on direction from council. There's no sort of internal commitment being made that you will be supplied with X amount of space for a certain amount of time. That's correct?
Ms. Williams.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that is correct. It would be no different than the staff in this building or any of our other buildings, and there's no expectation that council might not have a future use for this building, and they have every right to make that decision at any time.
Yes, Councillor Watson.
So in that, just following up, I'd just like to comment following up on Councillor Appleton's question and observation there. I guess a scenario then that isn't, I mean, there's so many options, but a scenario would be to invest the money, possibly use the space for 5 years, and then lease space if we needed it. So we could still meet our objectives because we haven't tied ourselves. We've spent the money, but as Councillor Patterson has pointed out, is a proportion of the total investment we need to support infrastructure investment. It's a small proportion. Thank you for that question.
This might be a good time for me to share the remarks of our mayor, who is unable to make the meeting tonight. I will share, he sent me an email today from an airport, I'm assuming. And this speaks to Councillor Braithwaite's comments previously. I support the use of the Monterey building for office space in the interim, given the nearly $380,000 cost difference to the municipality over the 10 years. This may be a good opportunity to start putting money into an affordable housing fund that can grow and be available to help provide affordable housing or subsidized housing options in Oak Bay in the future. That idea could be referred to staff, but the numbers don't lie. We should use the Monterey House for district use for now. I think the biggest issue in the decision is the optics, losing housing in a housing crisis. My thoughts on that are that the district has sought nonprofit tenants to provide services to refugees, has done this through highly discounted lease rates ever since the house was acquired, with only modest success and use in that time. Better for the building to be fully utilized for the reasons cited in the report. The number are stark enough that we would be better off funding thousands a month for other housing than using this for housing and renting externally. I consider the Windsor Pavilion idea off the table. It is a key and heavily used resource for the community. I don't know if that helps us, but I think it's adding another voice to the mix. I knew this would be a difficult situation tonight. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, Madam Chair, just through you to staff, I am not quite certain because I haven't been through this before. If we can again put forward the motion to use, for option 1, using 1538, even though it was defeated earlier in the meeting? Can we put it forward again as an option?
Mr. Coates?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the rules around matters like this are that a member who was on the prevailing side of the motion, so that's in the case of the use of Monterey, so those who voted against the motion are on the prevailing side. So the reconsideration of that can come from one of those council members, and that's Smart, Watson, Appleton, or yourself, Your Worship. And the other option for reconsideration is that you, in the acting mayor capacity, can require council to reconsider it. So the first one is one of those members could propose a motion to reconsider it. The council would discuss, debate, and determine, or the mayor can require council to reconsider it, and then that motion is actually back on the table as live.
Yes, thank you. This is most unfair to an acting mayor, I want to say. I've never been in a dilemma like this either, and I've been at council for many years, off and on. So I saw a hand up. I see two hands. So Councillor Appleton first, and then Councillor Watson.
Madam Chair, if I might, potentially this takes some of the pressure off of you, but as one of the prevailing members of that vote, I would propose that that vote on option number 1 be reconsidered.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. So we have, oh, sorry, Councillor Smart. Go ahead.
I just wondered if I could suggest a friendly amendment to that initial motion. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Coates.
Oh.
So before council is the reconsideration of that motion. So that motion can't be amended, but if the motion is to reconsider is approved, that motion is live and it can be amended. If that was Councillor Smart's intent, which I understand would probably be the case. So in order for the reconsideration to proceed, it's been moved and seconded. Council is able to debate the reconsideration of that motion to whatever extent you wish. And then once that debate is finished, Madam Mayor, you can call the question. And then if it passes, then that motion is back live on the floor and it's free to be amended at council's will.
Thank you so much. Oh, this is a lesson in governance. All right, so we have a motion on the floor now to reconsider the original motion, which was option 1 for the Monterey House. So I'll take comments or discussion on the reconsideration or questions. Councillor Smart.
So just to clarify then, we would have to have a successful vote in favor before considering an amendment to
That's
it.
correct. We would have to vote to reconsider.
Okay.
I will call the question then to reconsider the original motion. Councillor Smart.
So is this a time in which I could comment on my feelings on the original motion?
No, you would comment on your feelings about the reconsideration. And then once, if the reconsideration passes and we go back to option 1, the original motion, then that's the time to comment on your feelings around option 1. Is that helpful?
Oh, because we're only voting to reconsider.
That's right.
We're not voting on the motion.
No,
Okay, sorry.
no.
Sorry.
We're
I got lost in the
We're
logistics.
only
Thank
voting,
you.
listen, join the club. I'm lost too.
Thank you.
All right, so, but I'm very grateful to staff. Gosh, I don't know how you would do this without you. So I'm going to call the question on the reconsideration. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Now, we are back to the original motion of 1538 Monterey, and it is live on the floor. And we will now take comments. To the screen. Right, I'm getting confused. So now I will take comments or questions on the original motion. Thank you. Mr. Watson.
I just want to thank my council colleagues for hanging in there and thinking this through out loud. And I'm glad that we've come back to this spot. And I think I have been comforted in thinking about a range of using Monterey Avenue, 1538 Monterey, doesn't close doors to future options, and it doesn't even necessarily commit to a 10-year time frame in that property. And I think, having heard that, I think I'm comfortable with the motion, because I agree with Councillor Patterson, and I'm sure turning to staff, that any longer term policy or planning development has a time frame that is at least 5 years plus, and that in the meantime we need to get going with a big Oak Bay priority. So I am comfortable with the motion now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Smart.
I'm still not entirely comfortable with the motion as it stands, but I would suggest a friendly amendment that we simultaneously conduct a feasibility study around the best use of that site long-term for housing, to send a clear message to the community that although we would be occupying this for office space, that that we have a long-term vision here that involves potentially non-market housing.
So I have an amendment. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, this is, it comes up.
Okay. Mm-hmm. We have a proposed amendment. We don't have a seconder yet. But Councillor Appleton would like to ask a question. Is that, no, it's not permissible.
Second for discussion.
Councillor Appleton, thank you. He seconded the motion for discussion. So go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
I'm in favor of the, I think I understand the intent of what's being proposed here. The only issue that I have is that it specifically, and maybe that, I don't know, I'm speaking to Councillor Smart's intentions, but right now the motion reads residential use. And it could very well be, given where it's located, that might not be the exclusive use. This could be a mixed commercial residential. So just, I guess I would ask the mover of the motion whether or not that was something that she intended to include.
Councillor Smart?
I agree. I wouldn't want to limit it, and maybe the best mixed use or best used, highest and best use. Thank you. Highest and best used for that property would more accurately reflect my views. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments on the motion, option one? And Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to jump in and try not to put a monkey wrench into this, but the intent of the village area plan is to assess the highest and best use of all of the lands in the village and develop guidelines around that. Certainly, we could roll this to ensure it's captured. We could entertain maybe a resolution that says that this be considered as a part of the village area plan, which will naturally happen. I'm just worried we're putting the cart before the horse if we conduct a study on this specific piece of property right now outside of the scope of the full village area.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to Ms. Williams. I think that it actually could be a catalyst for the urban village plan, and maybe you can comment on how quickly we'll get to that. But I actually think that I don't think we need to wait. But maybe it's coming up so soon, and maybe you could comment on the timing there.
Ms. Williams, is it possible to comment on the timing around the village plan?
Through Your Worship, thank you. At this time, we don't have a defined time. Council will be considering all of those projects on February 6th. And subsequent to that, based on the options that are presented, timelines would be considered. So at this time, I don't have a response on that one.
Thank you, and that's fair. And I do think February 6th will be the ideal time for you to make your case around timing and expediting. I have Councillor Smart has a supplementary.
I just wanted to say I still stand by the amendment as written, and I actually think it's really important to tie it to this motion, just to show the community that we really are future thinking and leaders, and that we're not making this decision to change residential to office space without these loftier goals.
Thank you. I have Councillor Watson, then Councillor Appleton, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Just speaking to the proposed friendly amendment or amendment, I just want to say respectfully that I think that looking at the highest and best use of this property in the absence of having done the policy work for the wider area is actually misguided, because the highest and best use needs to be set in the context of what the policy is for the surrounding area. So I don't think it would advance things very much, and I hope that even our discussion tonight signals to the community that we are concerned about this, but I think it would be an unnecessary interim piece of work to ask staff to do, given what we have already, or we are already anticipating that you're going to set out to do. So I don't think it would be a useful exercise, and I say that with all respect. Thank you.
I have now Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Following up on that discussion, I take a different view. I actually concur with the mover of the amendments rationale for presenting this at this time. I think that we are, as has already been discussed tonight, some years off with the village planning process. We do have guiding documents and information from pieces of information recently received by council, like the infill housing strategy, that speak really clearly to the community's interest in looking at redevelopment scenarios, especially along Oak Bay Avenue. There was strong response in that particular area for looking at this type of redevelopment. So I take the view that this specific that there is value in evaluating this specific property as a catalyst, template, example, force generator for the village planning process. And I have faith in council and in staff moving forward that anything that was evaluated would be done within the parameters of the OCP. And to the intent of revitalizing the village. So I can see the clear value and the clear intent in seeing things holistically. I have no intention of circumventing or piecemealing out a village planning process. This property, to my mind, is unique because it's owned by the district and has the ability to act as that catalyst piece. So I can see the rationale there. I think this particular property has some specific advantages to it, so I'm in favor of this amendment.
I have Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm following up really on Councillor Watson's comments, and I just also want to say how much I appreciate the discussion around the council table and the willingness of my colleagues around the council table to find a resolution to this really difficult discussion. But I do agree with Councillor Watson that you really have to do the feasibility. You have to look at it in the context of the village plan, but I also am mindful of we would all like the property to be a good commercial revenue producing property long run. It's a better use of the property for the community, but that we also have to do feasibility studies on the marina, on Carnarvon Park building, on the fire hall property, public works. So we have a lot. My main goal here is to get the staffing in place to enhance the very limited staffing we have to do to assign them work on the feasibility study for this one property at this point in time, rather than moving forward to get the rest of the staff in place that can also add to that discussion and get us to the best answers. I think that's the way to move forward. So certainly appreciate the intent and the desire to send a strong message out to the community. And hopefully we are doing that tonight with the discussion. But we are in the very early stages of starting a total facilities review. And I think that certainly as we revisit the library and the Monterey Center and Municipal Hall, all of our facilities, we are going to be involved in very in-depth feasibility discussion on all of our properties and what the village plan looks like. And so I don't want to drive this one unit and separate it in the context of all of the buildings, which I think are going to be quite a major project for us to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Smart?
I guess where I'm thinking right now is that we're in a housing crisis and we're not doing enough to address housing for our community in our housing needs report. And I don't see this as simply a gesture to the community, but I see this as a stepping stone to the fact that the provincial government has suggested that they're going to come forward with both assistance and financial support, and we need to be ready for that. And this is our best property for that. And if we wait for the village plan and we wait to roll that out, we're maybe talking 4 years from now. We need to be ready so that we have a sense of the capacity of this property, because we're a property owner for this particular double lot, which has so much opportunity. We need to be ready when those grant operations come around. And I think regardless of the village plan, we need to know the capability of this particular site.
Are there any excuse me, are there any other comments or questions? So we have the motion on the table with the amendment, friendly amendment. I'll call, excuse me, sorry. I will call the amendment first as it reads, and everyone can see that clearly. Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amendment to the original motion for option 1. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, thank you. That amendment passes. Now to the original main motion. My goodness. Are there any further comments on the main motion? And we have made quite a few. And I too, by the way, have really appreciated everyone's patience and forbearance. It has not been an easy process. Councillor Appleton, did you have a comment?
I'll just take the opportunity, Madam Chair, just as the person who put forward the reconsideration and asked it to be revalued. I'll just make a comment at this stage of the game that I concur. Robust discussion, very good debate of a not straightforward answer here. So I'm very, very pleased with that. I'm sufficiently convinced and sufficiently compelled by the discussion around the table and by some of the new information that we've received that I think that we can, at least in the near term, make the 1538 Monterey property work. I think we've had some really good discussions about the future intent for the space. Council is communicating, as Councillor Patterson has said, its interest in doing that in the intermediate and near term as well. So I think that the outcome is good. And I say, as somebody who voted against in the initial phase of debate, I'm sufficiently compelled by the discussion to support 1538 at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Appleton. Are there any other comments before I weigh in briefly? Well, first of all, that was quite something, and I am very impressed with the level of discussion at the table. There was at one point where I thought, what are we going to do and where are we going to go? Very difficult. I thought it was timely to share Mayor Murdoch's comments, given that he's not here. He thought he might get here at some point during the meeting, but that doesn't appear to be possible now, certainly not for this item. I have been as you know, long-standing supporter of using Monterey House for socially beneficial housing, and we have done that, not terribly successfully, unfortunately. I continue to believe in the importance of that house as a symbol of accessible housing in Oak Bay, which is not often the case. I agree with Councillor Smart that we need to be prepared and ready for whatever the provincial government brings our way. Hopefully it is funding. That would be very helpful. It is a really difficult struggle in Oak Bay to find what's called affordable housing or accessible housing because of our situation around land values and so on. But there was a lot of hope and promise. I think Monterey House symbolizes aspiration. We do provide, though, Oak Bay is not completely missing the mark on housing. We do provide a major contribution every year to the CRD's Regional Housing Trust Fund. We have rental housing at below market prices in our own community that we own, buildings that we own, and we have rental units in those, and they're all below market rents. That's my understanding. And the idea of creating a local housing trust fund, affordable housing trust fund, has come forward as well from this council. So we are definitely, I think, committed and compassionate on the housing front. It's just so hard to get there. And this house had a lot of promise. So it is a very difficult decision. I will not be supporting the motion for that reason. I had hoped that Monterey would continue to hold promise, but I really appreciate all of the discussion and the comments of my colleagues. Thank you. So I will now call the question on the motion. Option 1, 1538 Monterey. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much, everybody. So that motion passes. And thank you very much to our staff tonight for their patience and for bearing. So we will now move on to, yes, thank you, item 7.2, and this is from the Committee of the Whole held on January the 16th. Thank you, Mr. Graham, by the way, and Ms. Bay for being here, sorry. 7.2 is a referral from the Committee of the Whole held January 16th, 2023. This is the Fire Services Review and Master Plan. We had quite a bit of discussion at the time. This does not require staff input. Chief McDonald did a fine job on the 16th. So I am looking for a recommendation, please, or a motion.
Motion to move the two staff recommendations from the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Second by Councillor Patterson or Braithwaite, which? Okay, Councillor Patterson. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. We move to 7.3 from the Committee of the Whole held at January 16, 2023, and this is on the delegation, the Bowker at B and Friends of Bowker Creek, the Cool Kit project as well. This again is previously from the Committee of the Whole, and I am looking for a motion. I don't believe this requires public input, does it, Mr. Coates? Oh, it does.
Your worship, it sure can, yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, it's eligible.
Oh, it is eligible. I'm sorry. So if I could get a motion, and then we'll...
I'll move the recommendation from Committee of the Whole.
That was moved by Councillor Appleton, seconded by Councillor Braithwaite. And now I will look for questions or comments and then public input. Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff, although the staff is limited with us tonight, I guess. I was wondering, I did send in a question, but I haven't had a response. I was just wondering if the plan that was proposed in for the Bowker Creek walkway redevelopment area, if that is feasible, if we understand yet whether that is feasible in the overall stormwater management plans.
Your Worship, I do have some information from the Deputy Director of Engineering Services, which I believe is specific to Councillor Patterson's question. And so the comments are that the proposed walkway would be on the bank above Boker Creek, not in the riparian zone. It's not expected that this walkway would have any impact on the creek itself or its ability to convey stormwater flows.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Are there any other comments or questions? I now will then go to the public. Hello, Mr. Sirois. Are you here to speak to this item by any chance? No. Oh, okay. Thank you. Do we have anyone online? No. Okay. So no public input. All right, then I think we can probably just move to call for the question, and I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Moving on to bylaws and permits. And 8.1, this item is not subject to public input. This is 8.1, the zoning amendment and heritage designation bylaw for 1391 Oliver Street. Just a caution. Oh, Mr. Bowl is back. Great, thank you. Just a caution that this is a post-public hearing. So the public hearing occurred last summer. We have to be careful that we take in no new information since then. And Mr. Bowl, may I turn this over to you briefly? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I also have Ms. McDougall on the line in case there's follow-up questions.
Welcome, Ms. McDougall.
And so in this file, we're after the public hearing and to consider the adoption of two bylaws. And since the public hearing, the covenant has been prepared, which also has been provided to you recently. It was not provided last week initially. And yeah, it's here for your consideration for approval, including authorization to register the covenant. The covenant is related to tree protection and certain site conditions. And if council wants to delve into the more details, and Ms. McDougall can pull up some of those details, but otherwise it's ready for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone around the table have any questions? No. I
Move receipt.
thank you. Move receipt, seconded, and all those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
And would you like the two amendments read separately, or read them twice? Okay. So I'll move that mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute section 219 covenant, and that 1391 Oliver Street zoning amendment bylaw number 4818/2022 be adopted.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Appleton, thank you. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
And I'll move that 1391 Oliver Street heritage designation bylaw number 4819/2022 be adopted.
Councillor Appleton seconds. Any questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Bowl. Sorry. Mr. Coates, could you?
Sign language, just Your Worship.
I'm not good with sign language, obviously.
Yeah, planning staff will be here from item 9 as well. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Bowl. This one is subject to public input. This is item 9.1, and it's the DVP 00126-772 Victoria Avenue, and Ms. McDougall is also here. Thank you, Ms. McDougall. So I will turn this over to you, Mr. Bowl, and to Ms. McDougall for comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Ms. McDougall has prepared some introductory comments for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes, really well. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, great. So the District of Oak Bay received a development variance permit application for 772 Victoria Avenue. The applicant would like to reduce the required minimum lot width from 15.25 meters in the RS5 zone to 13.77 meters, a reduction of 1.48 meters or 5 feet. The applicant is proposing to subdivide and redevelop the lot into 2 single-family homes. The 2 new lots would generally be consistent with the subdivision plan and parcel layout for the surrounding area, and the proposed development would result in 2 shorter and smaller single-family homes with additional open space in between them as compared to 1 larger single-family home. The proposed development would be a modest form of infill housing, which is consistent with the stated OCP policy objectives. The proposed development will create up to 4 units on the 2 lots if secondary suites are included in the construction plans. At its regular meeting of January 9th, 2023, Council directed staff to issue notice of its intent to consider the development variance permit application. Notice was subsequently mailed to 23 adjacent property owners and residents within 50-meter radius, as per the land use procedures and fees bylaw. 3 letters of correspondence have been received, generally in support of the project, and one of those letters with questions about tree removal on the properties. The applicant has conducted some neighborhood consultation, which was provided as attachment 4. Overall, staff considered the requested variance to be supportable and are now seeking council direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Mr. Boulder, do you have anything to add? Okay, thank you. So, council, I am seeking a motion.
I'll move receipt.
Oh, just a minute, sorry. Is there someone here to speak to it?
Your worship, I believe the applicants are in the building, and they've been advised that the matter is before you. I don't know whether they wish to speak or whether they just wish to view, but they're certainly able to be given the opportunity. You can hear that now, or you can hear it when you call for public input as well.
Would you, sorry, you're welcome again. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I won't take too long. Sorry for my earlier interruption of the council meeting. Thank you, Your Worship.
State your name and your address. Thank you.
Sure, yes.
Just for the record, thank
Yeah.
you.
My name is Jennifer Lind, and I live at 762 Victoria Avenue.
Thank you.
So I'm here with my husband, Joel Bisson. And we are here because we are the immediate neighbors of 772 Victoria. So as you probably know, to one side of the property is a school, and to the other side is us. So we have I would say, we have a concern about the variance proposal. Before coming here tonight, we actually were going to say that we support the variance until we found out about the trees that are going to be removed. We're here for 3 concerns. One of them, the primary concern, is the tree removal. The secondary concern is where heat pumps might be located. And the third concern is the height of back decks. But for sure, the primary reason we're here is to state our concerns about the tree removals. So I'd like to any questions so far?
If you go ahead, and then if there are questions, I will canvass the council. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I'm actually going to pass around a photograph of the trees so that you can visualize them, if that's all right.
If you would provide that to staff, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
We just figured it would be a visual of, so it's the same photo.
Thank you, Mr. Coates.
So as you will see in the photograph, there are 2 homes And the trees that are proposed to be removed are the trees shown on the property line between the two homes. We understand there are 13 trees on the property. I know tree removal is a concern for everybody in Oak Bay. Our concern with these trees, as you'll see in the photograph, is 3 of the biggest trees on the property actually provide privacy for our residents, and that's why we're concerned. Can we show one more photograph, Mr. Coates? Can we pass another photograph? I have photographs of Victoria Avenue, the east side and the west side. And you'll see that the street right now is actually, especially on the east side, is looking quite barren. A lot of trees have already been removed. So you'll see on the east side, it's quite barren. On the west side, which is where 772 is located and our house is located, you'll see in the skyline there are actually some trees. If we go ahead with the tree removal, all of those trees will be gone and Victoria Avenue will start to look like any other suburb in Winnipeg, Ottawa. I come from Ottawa, so I say that with respect. But we will be losing a great deal of Oak Bay ambiance and BC environment. So we're concerned about that. And I don't know how you make a decision on something like that. We were hoping, we don't know if the arborist is here tonight or not, but we know those trees are very old and it will take generations to replace anything like that. We hope that council will consider opening up the dialogue on moving the 2 properties a little bit closer to the school to allow those 3 old trees to remain. We hope there's some other possibilities, and that's why we're here. We weren't going to come here and disagree with the variance. The owners of 772 have been very helpful. They've been engaging neighbors to explain things to us, but we only recently learned that those trees are coming down. So that's our concern. The second concern, as I mentioned, is the heat pump. We have 1 heat pump. It's actually quite loud. I've looked into dampening the noise from the heat pump. It's not possible. Apparently the noise is acceptable level for a heat pump. When heat pumps, if they're part of the developmental plan for these 2 new homes, we would graciously ask for the plans to put the heat pumps on the north side of those homes so that we don't have our heat pump and their heat pump competing with each other. That's a small request, but we'd ask that it be included. And the last one is the height of the back deck, especially if the trees are removed. I mean, we're going to be looking across at siding. And if we can have the back deck low to the ground, at least there would be some enhanced privacy. And I think I've probably spoken for long enough.
Thank you, Ms. Lind. Just a question. Have you talked to your neighbors about your concerns about the deck and heat pump and trees? You said they were fairly engaging and helpful. Have you discussed this with them at all?
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back to my emails. I don't know if we raised the concern of the heat pump, but absolutely we raised concern about the trees in the back deck. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, it's a question for Mr. Bull. Mr. Bull, as far as heat pumps go, be situated in relation to a house?
Through the chair, yes, definitely. There's a regulation in zoning bylaw about the noise level and where in the setbacks they could be located. I can't tell you exact details about it. Ms. McDougall might know more details, but maybe similar to me is not entirely up to speed on that. But, so there are certain restrictions that would regulate that, and that would normally result in a certain placement that tries to avoid noise impacts to the neighbors.
Do I have any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you for listening to our concerns. I hope the photographs give you an idea of how things could really look different there. Thank you.
Yes, the photos were helpful. Thank you so much. Mr. Bull, do you have any further comments?
Thank you, Chair. Not at this moment. If there's follow-up questions, we can definitely pull up some more details for Council if needed. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite has a question.
Mr. Bull, do you know if any of the trees that have been pointed out tonight are within the building envelope, or are they on the property line? Do we know that? Because I can't tell from looking at the picture in the staff report.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I'm wondering if Ms. McDougall can assist us with pulling up the tree management plan and
Yes.
give you a bit more insight on which trees are where and whether they're proposed to be retained or removed. And while she pulls it up, I hope, I just wanted to know that there are 4 trees to be removed on site and 11 to be retained, I believe. And in total, 5 trees will be removed, including a street tree, but there's also a requirement to replace those trees with 10 new trees. So with that, I'm wondering if Ms. McDougall is available to further elaborate on the tree management plan.
Yes, I am available to comment on that. I wonder if it might be helpful for me to share a screen that shows some of that information. I would imagine that a visual image might be more helpful than otherwise.
Ms. McDougall, that would be very helpful if you could do that. Thank you.
All right, just give me a second here. There we go. Are you able to see my screen by any chance?
Be huge on the screen, on the big screens, but can you see it?
I'm zooming in here.
It's not. It's quite small from a distance, so it's a little hard to make out. Actually, sorry.
All right. Well, I'll try to highlight here on the south side of the property. There are 3 that would be overlapping with the building footprint. The one tree in the front yard here, which would be on the east side of the property, is probably being impacted by potential siting of a driveway access, along with, you can't see it right now because this taskbar is blocking it, but there we go. The other tree in the boulevard, which likewise would be impacted by the siting of a driveway. So just the 3 trees along the south side would actually be impacted by the siting of a future building.
So thank you, Mr. Gull. So basically, the building envelope would affect those 3 trees. To save those trees because we've already pushed the limits in between the 2 houses. Is that correct?
I might jump in.
Mr.
So
Bull,
thank you, Chair. The building footprints are fairly long. You can see it on the site plan, or you just could see it in a moment. It depends a bit on the size of the house that is being built there. With the long building envelope like that, you could see whoever's going to design the building in detail could decide to focus the building volume at the front or at the end. But it's very high tentatively. Maybe there is an option for one of the trees. That said, this has been reviewed by our staff, and there is support from the Parks Department on the proposal, based on our regular expectations about trees and replacement, particularly, I think. So yeah, it's possible. At the same time, not required for the permit at this point. It's also not the topic of the variance itself, of course, but of course, considering the variance today does allow future subdivision, and therefore, this is follow-up effect, of course. So it's definitely something that council can consider as part of the variance. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, it's always hard when we're faced with, adding to our housing and taking down trees. It's a very difficult decision to come up against. Yeah, it's very unfortunate that those trees are, or the building has to be sited in the position it's in, but it's a difficult decision to come to. But I do look at the arborist report, and it seems like they have looked at everything that they could. So yeah, thank you.
Mr. Bowl, do you or Ms. McDougall have any comments on the height of a deck that was mentioned by any chance? Thank you.
Would you like me to take a?
Thank you very much, Ms. McDougall. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So at this point, we don't have any specific plans from the applicant for specific building design. So I would maybe even actually ask the applicant to jump in and talk about what they have thought through in terms of their design and their approach to the site. And then if we need more additional information from staff, we can definitely add to that. But at this point, there has not been a specific building design scheme being considered or at least viewed by staff.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments from council? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to staff. Just in response to the comments from the public that we've received tonight, it may very, and I know that the applicant is online and listening to the feedback that's being provided here, it may very well be that even though these trees are entrained in this subdivision application, that the ability to retain those trees is driven very much by the design of the forthcoming houses. So it may well be, I guess I would hope, echoing Councillor Braithwaite's comments, it's not an easy decision to make, but I would say that what is in front of us right now is the subdivision, and that there is still the opportunity for the applicant in the design and the construction of the proposed houses on the subdivided lots to do their utmost to accommodate those trees. So I do appreciate communicating that information in this context to the applicant. Some of that is within our purview, and some of it, of course, is not. But I would hope that the applicant would take up that commentary and in the design do their utmost. Given the situation, I'm not an arborist, and I can appreciate our staff's comments, as has been mentioned. Given the location, at or near the property line, I would hope that there would be some opportunity to potentially address that and retain them. But again, what was in front of us tonight is the subdivision, which does entrain the trees, but I think that there is still an opportunity to speak to the retention of the trees through the design of the subsequent houses as well, and to some of the other issues that have been raised by members of the public tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Watson?
I have because of this discussion around the trees and the subdivision itself, I have a question for staff. Maybe I'll direct it to Mr. Bull first, and he can deflect to Ms. McDougall if he needs to. But looking at the application, there was this discussion about driveway access in the staff report. And is an approval of the item in front of us tonight fixing the location of those driveway accesses, or could two neighboring properties collaborate to create a single point of access that service two lots? Thank you. I hope that's clear. He'll ask me for clarification if that was too garbled, but okay, you've got it. All right, thanks.
Thank you, through the chair. That's definitely something that will be further detailed. So, in other words, the development variance permit does not fixate that location of the the driveway just yet. I just want to check with Ms. McDougall if this came up just yet at all yet, or if she knows reasons why those driveways would be fixed at this point.
No, the driveways are not fixed at this point, and I would imagine that there would be further conversation at the subdivision stage, specifically with regards to the boulevard trees and probably the tree in the front yard and strategic positioning of a driveway.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Braithwaite?
I'm wondering, did we call the question on the receipts of the, no, okay, so that's motion still on, so I think we can.
So I'm going to call the question on the motion to receive. Oh, sorry. Mr. Coates? Yes, please. Would you take a seat and then just state your name and address? Thank you.
Joe will want to speak. So, yeah, my name is Dan Savard. I live at 767 Victoria Avenue,
Welcome.
across the street.
Welcome here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I sent an email about the trees, and I got a nice response. Not just a nice response, but an in-depth response from Chris. But when I was outside, just here in the thing, my question is a clarification. How many houses are going in? I thought there were 2 houses. Are there going 2 houses with 4 units or something? Or I don't know. I didn't happen to see that. So there will be four units there. Is that correct?
Mr. Bowe, would you like to comment? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. This would result in 2 homes, 2 houses.
Yes.
2 houses. They could have secondary suites as per the bylaw, so that's secondary suites inside a single-family home. Each could have 1, so that makes 4.
I see.
That's the number 4 you heard earlier. Yeah.
And just as a matter of course, that I understand infill, and I understand keeping the canopy and accommodating infill. And I live in Oak Bay. I'm part of Greater Victoria, and what's happening in other municipalities is really quite interesting. Langford. So here's the thing. I think we all want canopy here, and that's why people come to Oak Bay. But we're also faced with, realistically, with infill. So my long-winded question is this: with when council makes recommendations for the fact that you can have suites adjacent, suites within your house, that's part of an overhaul plan. That applies to everybody, doesn't it? I mean, that we're trying to increase the number of people that live in Oak Bay. That's all I was trying to determine from this circuitous route that I've taken. So there's going to be 2 houses, as we see, and there's going to be could be a possibility of 4. Whoever moves there might want to put a suite in. Okay, that was my question.
Well, have we answered it sufficiently, do you think?
Well, I think we have, because that's the accepted practice now, addressing infill.
So 2 single-family dwellings that each potentially could have a suite, so 4 living units in total.
And that's across the board. What I mean by that is we could build on the downs or whatever, and the same thing's going to happen. It's right across Oak Bay.
That's
Fine.
the intention, yes.
Yeah,
Suites
okay. I understand.
are regulated across Oak Bay,
Right.
yes.
Right.
Thank
I
you.
understand we're all between a rock and a hard place with people wanting to move in and infill and getting pressure from the provincial government, as I understand it. I'm a neophyte, but I think I understand that.
You have a pretty good understanding.
Well, thanks very much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your comments, and thank you for coming tonight. Yes, sir. Do you wish to speak? Yes, sir. And if you'll just state your name and address, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Joel Biso. I'm spouse with to Jennifer Lind at 762 Victoria. Just, as a way to potentially preserve the trees on the south side, has council considered the idea of potentially having the homes located east-west as opposed to north-south? It's a very long lot, and I guess there's precedence because we see this often where you have this kind of one single driveway that goes into two homes. I'm just wondering if that might be a better use of the property to have the homes kind of situated east-west as opposed to north-south. Thank you.
Mr. Bull, do you want to respond? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wasn't aware that this has been discussed earlier in the process. Ms. McDougall can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not a type of lot layout that is typically pursued. It creates other issues, site planning issues, particularly for people that face onto the backyard of this property, because other backyards would be facing it. It is a large parcel, that's true, so it's just something that I don't think has been explored. It would be an unusual site planning approach, but I'll leave it at that. I notice, I think the applicant himself is also represented, so if they would like to make any comments, I invite them to also raise their hands, but that's all I have to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Does the applicant wish to make any comments on the question that was just posed about changing the sight lines for the buildings?
Yes, please. My name's Lewis. I'm with Zebra Design. Generally speaking, we don't do panhandle type lots just because of that reason. They create overlooking issues in most cases, which is clearly undesirable by the neighbor. So this is a typical subdivision development. We end up with how so we chose to produce the traditional approach to subdividing the property.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment? Okay, well, thank you, and I appreciate the comments that have been made so far and the participation by members of the audience. Thank you.
I'll move the recommendation that development variance permit DVP 00126 for the property located at 772 Victoria Avenue be approved.
Is there a seconder, Councillor Patterson? Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions? I will just reinforce what Councillor Appleton said earlier, that I think this has been healthy for the applicant to hear your comments and concerns, and hopefully you can go away and perhaps sit down with the neighbor and see if you can work out some of the issues. I think it would be worth a try. So I appreciate you coming tonight too. And it's not always easy to come in and speak to council. Thank you. Hearing no other comments or questions from council, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And there was a second recommendation.
I'll move that. No.
Oh, there isn't. Okay. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. And those motions pass. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bull, Ms. McDougall, for being here.
Thank you.
And to all the residents, thank you. Okay, number 10, which is new business. I'm really glad for new business. Now, I see a statement that opens with the public input at the call of the chair on non-land use items only. This one may generate some commentary, I'm not sure. I would be quite happy if the public would like to speak, and I have a feeling Mr. Sirois might be here for that reason, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I will first, this is the Coastal Marine Strategy for BC Policy Intentions paper. Councillor Patterson has brought this forward to us, and thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to thank staff for managing to get this on the agenda promptly at my request. This is the Coastal Marine Strategy for BC Policy Intentions paper was put out by the province of BC. The intentions paper was drafted between the province and in collaboration with First Nations. As stated in the report, BC is one of the few maritime jurisdictions in North America without a comprehensive coastal marine strategy. I didn't realize that until the report was made public. And the purpose of the strategy is to guide us for the next 2 decades and to reflect the priorities and values of British Columbians. And I know that members of this community certainly share an interest in the priorities and values. Oak Bay's shoreline is referenced over 80 times in our official community plan, demonstrating its importance to the community. And also, I think we've demonstrated leadership because included in the OCP is protections with bylaws and policies such as our shoreline development permit area, which also promotes Green Shores guidelines. We've outlined hazardous slopes area along the shoreline in our OCP and stated our goals and intention for shoreline erosion mitigation and we've also undertaken actions like commissioning studies like the 2016 eelgrass survey report. And our rec center, in fact, supports youth boating programs. So through all aspects of our community life, we have a leadership position that we have taken and a commitment to protecting our shoreline, as do members of the community. The Royal Victoria Yacht Club and Oak Bay Marine Group participate in voluntary registration and certification for environmental responsibility. We heard, again, the report of Friends of Bowker Creek, which, again, they're interested in reintroducing salmon and going out into the waters. And of course, we have Mr. Sirois here tonight, who has taken quite a leadership role in protection and promotion of the migratory bird sanctuary. So I know there's a great interest in this from the community. On the downside, the intentions paper states the province's purpose and goals, and they're clearly and well laid out for those of you who have had a chance to look at them. But the deadline for input is April the 30th. Now, the input can be to the survey, the responses can be by private individuals, they can be by groups of individuals, and of course they could be from council. And while this is an issue that I would love to take up at the council table, with a deadline of April 30th for completing submissions and quite the extensive role of leadership and goals that Oak Bay has, it would be difficult for us to do justice, although I think certainly as members of council look through it, we may want to in fact draft some sort of a letter of submission once we have our minds around it. But what I am asking tonight in presenting this, I wanted to just give it airtime so that we all know it is there, and I would like to move a resolution that the information contained in the reports be referred to district staff to establish a communication strategy for introducing this to the public and promoting the ability of individuals or groups who wish to respond or submit to the province's recommendations. So that's a very simple ask, although you know, it's just very disappointing that this conflicts with financial planning and strategic priorities and everything else on the agenda. But I know that it's really important to the community, and certainly everyone that I've given a link to. I know the Yacht Club is very interested in it. Community Association of Oak Bay is friends about. Everybody is so. So that will be my ask, but members of the public may also want to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I actually went through the plan today, and it's very interesting. And we have made headway in Oak Bay, definitely. Mr. Siwad, would you like to speak to this item as well? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr.
Your
Coates?
Worship, so I think that was moved, but I didn't catch that it was seconded. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there is a motion on the table? Mr. Siwa, would you like to come forward? I'm sorry, I haven't done this before it's been too many years, so I'm just working my way along with the process here. And if you can just state your name and address, that would be great. Thank you.
Jacques Sirois, 542 St. Patrick Street. I will be brief. We live in a Salish sea. Environment around us is our main feature. Our shoreline is one of the most beautiful in urban Canada. And I often feel that we don't really have, as a community, a clear understanding of what is before us. So we are totally surrounded by a historic migratory bird sanctuary. We have 3 BC ecological reserves in our marine front yard: the Trial Islands, the Oak Bay Islands, and the 10 Mile Point. The chain islets just across from the Oak Bay Marina is also recognized as an important bird area, IBA site by BirdLife International. We also have a BC Marine Park on Discovery Island just across from us. And we have the Songhees Traditional Islands on the Chatham Islands, a big part of our marine front yard. We have substantial beds of eelgrass in Oak Bay, massive beds of clams. We have large patches of surf grass and kelp forests. So we have a lot of marine assets, and hopefully these will be somehow mapped or clearly advertised or highlighted. We need to talk about this a bit more seriously. And we still, for example, allow boats to anchor themselves near the marina over beds of eelgrass. They degrade our beds of eelgrass. So there's a lot of real things that could happen in terms of improving the situation. Just want to finish by saying we have an extraordinary situation in Oak Bay. We live in a special place. And we've had restoration programs along the shorelines and slightly inland for 3 decades. Uplands Park and Cattle Point have been under restoration for 30 years. The Trial Islands have been under restoration for 20 years. It's a huge project. We have restoration projects along the McNeil Bluff, now Trafalgar Park. We have an extraordinary set of restoration stories. And these stories need to be put together and celebrated and highlighted. And what we have is actually a fantastic, lots of positive marine stories. And this is the opportunity to bring all of this together. And this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we also appreciate your leadership on the foreshore and around our marine environments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I just wanted to ask Ms. Williams or Mr. Coates, the ask that Councillor Patterson has made, that's doable, I'm assuming. Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, it is. And just to clarify for the viewing public, I believe the deadline is April 14th. So just in case anyone out there is listening and taking notes, it's the 14th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. So remember, April 14th is the deadline on the input feedback portion of this study. Thank you very much. Any further comments? Sorry, Councillor Smart?
I just had a question for staff. This just brings attention to just seeing that the municipal local government portion of this has a lot to do with shoreline restoration. Could you bring to my attention the current bylaw or policy that would inform the restoration of shoreline for those areas like Harling Point that are dealing with a lot of erosion issues? I'm just curious where we would find that information.
Mr. Bull, thank you.
Through the chair, my answer is specifically applicable to private properties, of course. That's the one I'm most familiar with, but it's not much different for what we would adhere to ourselves. And that's for the development permit area and the OCP, Official Community Plan. It's the shorelines development permit area. It aims to protect environmental values, but also be prepared for geotechnical hazards. So that's our main tool to have guidelines and standards in relation to shoreline restoration.
Councillor Smart. Thank you, Mr. Bull. Councillor Smart?
Through you, Acting Mayor, to staff, I'm just wondering, do our current guidelines encourage a naturalization approach to restoring banks, or would you say that they encourage a more hard infrastructure approach?
Through the chair, let me see, I'm wondering if I take this back and get you some more detailed information, but I'll give you a general answer and I can definitely follow up with more details or a copy of the development permit area. I looked at it recently for a different reason, but I don't think it does either. I think the goal is environmental restoration, but it doesn't or preclude existing engineered solutions to be kind of either repaired or slightly improved perhaps. So I think that's where the answer is, but I'll double check to be sure, and I can forward some information to council if that's handy. Thank you.
Councillor Smart?
Sorry, just one more question. And how far up from the high water line does this DP area exist?
Through the chair, it extends to 15 meters above the natural boundary. I should say not above, that's confusing actually. I'm talking in the horizontal plane. So either side of the natural boundary, not the elevation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you. Just one more thing I wanted to add. I think it's really good that we familiarize ourselves with everything, all of the contents of this report. Because it was done in collaboration with First Nations, I'm sure that the information contained in the report will also inform any work we do with Songhees or Esquimalt Nations on the Willows Beach area or anything. So I think that this, because they participated in drafting this paper, so I think it's
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Thank you, Mr. Bull. I just want to quickly remind this council of a decision last year, I believe it was, that an applicant was building a new home with a swimming pool, and council actually turned them down and asked them to move the pool further away. So they moved it right back, actually, and kudos to them. But we do take the foreshore and the marine environment seriously, I think, and more so. Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions around Councillor Patterson's proposal? Okay, thank you. Carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson, and thanks to staff as well. Okay, we're moving on to Councillor Hazel Braithwaite and her motion around the keeping of bees. And I will turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Mr. Coates for putting this together for me. I do have a question to staff. Based on the fact that I've had a lot of questions from other councillors around this, is it possible, I know this is a notice of motion, if we put a motion on the floor tonight, would that be a possibility, or does it have to go as a notice of motion?
Sorry, so through the acting mayor, so this is for debate. So it was received within the required time in the council procedure bylaw, so it's eligible for debate tonight.
Thank you very much. So I'll give you a little bit of background. As you all know, in November, we had a delegation from the Oak Bay Beach Hotel come to us and ask us if we could look at allowing commercial businesses to keep bees. Right now, we do not permit that within Oak Bay. Other municipalities do. So it was suggested that perhaps we might look at changing our bylaws to include commercial properties to have the ability to keep bees at this time. And as we all know, and as is stated in the document before you, the climate change and environmental circumstances have really been impacting bees, and they're such an important part of our environment, and so it seems at this time beneficial to perhaps review our bylaws around this, and I think that staff could look to other municipalities for how they've changed their bylaws. That will help us in how we change ours. So I would like to put the motion on the floor that staff provide a project backgrounder identifying the resource implications and timing considerations of amending the zoning bylaw to expand beekeeping opportunities to commercial zoning.
Councillor Appleton seconds. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Are there any further comments or questions? All right, so we've all been stung by this recommendation, and I know I couldn't help it. It just came to me.
What's the buzz?
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Moving on, correspondence from other governments or agencies. Again, this has to do with the environment. This is from the District of Metchosin, a declaration on climate, energy, and biodiversity crisis. I don't think this requires action unless someone has any idea or comment or question about it.
I'll move receipt.
Okay, receipt is moved, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. And thanks to the District of Metchosin.
Move adjournment.
All those in favor? Me. Thanks, everybody. Wow, that was a long meeting. Thank you very much for your patience and your support too, by the way. Thanks to everyone who came tonight.